because my microphone is not working for some reason. But I'm going to continue. This picture is from Mary. So she put together this really cool image of testing out different quinacridone gold brands, Daniel Smith and American Journey. And you can see the American Journey brand in the top right. It's actually pretty dull compared to the Daniel Smith quinacridone gold. And the Daniel Smith quinacridone sienna is actually pretty vibrant. So there's some other options out there. I would actually, just looking at this image, recommend Daniel Smith over American Journey because that just looks a lot more vibrant and nice. Oh, thank you so much for the feedback about sound. I'm glad it's good enough. Cool. So we'll keep going. But anyway, I wanted to share this image. I thought that was really interesting. She was expressing some frustration using quinacridone gold from American Journey, which I can kind of see because the Daniel Smith brand seems to be a lot more vibrant. So it just goes to show you that it's not so much, things vary between brands, even with the same color name. So sometimes you have to test things out and find out what's working the best. Let's see here. So the other thing I wanted to share is, here we go. We are painting the German Shepherd today, Leo, and I'm painting him really big. But the photo that I shared with you is a screenshot, and so the resolution isn't very great. So if you maybe struggle with seeing all the details and needing a little bit more information, I would suggest painting him a little bit smaller. You'll see that I'm painting him pretty big. It's an ambitious painting, but I like painting big. And we'll see how it goes. I had another question, if you can share your art from past tutorials this month, and the answer is absolutely. So if you paint the bunny or the fish or the fast fish or anything I shared in January and you share it with me in February or 3 years from now, you can absolutely share it with me with that form on my website, and you will be entered into that month's giveaway. So whatever month you share your art is the month that you will be included in the giveaway, and you can share it as often and as much as you want to try your chances at every month's giveaway. I've been behind on YouTube comments and emails and shipping things out, so I appreciate your patience with me. I'm going to catch up with all of that this week. I think preparing for the TV segment kind of threw me off, and because I'm kind of nervous, but I'm excited. It's honestly just like what we're doing right now, except that I don't have to deal with the technology, so it'll be even better. Let's see, we can pause. Remember, you can pause and you can go back, but you can't go forward in a live. So if I'm moving too fast or you miss something, remember, just go back and pause. And the other thing is, we had somebody who was doing a live with us last time with Sully, and she was having some struggling with the paper warping and rippling, and it was she was dwelling on that and kind of trying to deal with that and not being able to keep up. So good paper is key, and especially if you're painting big, I love painting on 300-pound paper. If you're painting big, if you're painting smaller, you can get away with 140-pound, or you can stretch your paper. There are ways of working around that. And then the other thing that I've had a couple people mention is that struggle with perfectionism and trying to make it perfect and wanting to achieve, with a vision that you have in your head. And I get that. I totally get that. So the thing is, what I try to do to just to kind of rein it in a little bit is that principle of contrast. And often when we think of contrast, we think of contrast in values, lights and darks, and those are very important. But it's also a contrast in detail and kind of abstract, blurry elements. And that will help you kind of get past that perfectionism tendency where we can go for that photorealistic kind of in focus detail in the eyes and the mouth and the face, but then let watercolor be really watercolory in the other areas of the painting. And I really like that watercolor lends itself so well to being able to do that. Now I know it's also just a matter of, practicing your skill and gaining confidence. So you're in the right place to do all those things. All right, let's catch up on here. We were talking about quinacridone gold. Yep, yeah. I mean, I do see that. I can see that. It's not as good. I used to use M-Gram quinacridone gold, and I love M-Gram a lot. So that would be another brand to try if you do not like the American Journey brand. I'm testing out Core watercolors very soon, and I have a feeling that I'm going to switch over from American Journey to Core. But American Journey is a great brand. And if you stocked up on American Journey, don't like get disheartened because it's a great brand and you can definitely use those paints for as long as you have them or share them with anybody else. So yes, we're looking for deals. I love Jerry's Artorama. They ship really fast, I found. They're shipped faster than Cheap Joe's, which is nice. Could I share a picture that I painted with what I learned from you, but not one of your tutorials? Yes. So I'm going to add a section on my website that just says kind of like random art or something like that, because I've had students already email me some art that they've made from techniques that they've learned, but it's not necessarily a paint-along. And I think that's the gold. That's the money. So I absolutely want to share that, because if you can take, color pulling or like pulling color and dropping in water and scraping and lifting and apply those techniques to the art that you really want to paint, that's where the magic is, because then it'll really feel like your art, and you're growing your skills and you're finding your style. And that's what I really hope all of my students will do, because it's applying those techniques and the 3-step process and the principles and the properties to your own art that I think you will be able to level up faster. So I'd love to see whatever art you make, if you've incorporated something that you've learned. It doesn't have to be a paint-along from my videos. That's awesome. I'm going to dive right in now, because this is kind of a longer, bigger painting. And as we take breaks, I will come back and take a look at the chat, and we'll keep going in that way. So this is always tricky because I can't. Okay, so you can see everything we need to see here. So we have Leo, the German Shepherd, and you can see, here's my hand, right? This is a big painting. It takes up basically the full sheet of paper that I'm working on. So I'm working on 300-pound cold pressed Fabriano. I love Fabriano. Arches is great. Kilimanjaro is great. If it's 300-pound, 100% cotton, you're in the money right there. And you can see too, with the tracing I gave you, that I went in and I've refined and kind of added some details here. It's hard to capture a lot of detail in a tracing. So I always like to go in after I trace it onto my paper and add in details. Anything I think I might need as far as information of where I need to put paint. So that's what I did. So I encourage you to just take a few minutes to look over your tracing, compare it to the reference photo, and see, is my image on my paper that I've drawn out, is there enough information for me to know where I need to put my paint? And so really I just refined the eyes and the nose, and then I refined some of the mouth and the teeth, because like I said, this reference photo is pretty low resolution, but it's worthwhile exercise to stretch ourselves working with a low resolution photo. And it's kind of like a sweet and sour situation, and it's sour that it's low resolution, so we don't have as much detail to work with, and it's sweet in that because we are lacking some detail, it will allow us to paint a little faster, lean into watercolor's wateriness. And I think it kind of stretches us as artists a little bit. And often, especially if you do custom pet portraits for commission, you might only have a low quality reference photo to work with. So it's a good thing to practice as well. So I'm going to make sure I'm zoomed in enough. I can't zoom in too much, or viewers might not be able to see my supplies. Before we do this, we have to fill out our painting planner. So we have Leo, and the mood for Leo is, I want it to be kind of pastel. and warm. So I'm hoping to stay away from blue, any cool color, obviously green, and then purple. And purple is going to be the hard one because purple is my buffer color. It's my best friend. And I'm going to try to mix up these two mixes to see if there'll be more of our buffer colors today instead of purple. So we'll start with the eyes because they'll take a lot of detail. And that's we typically just do eyes in the same way. There's an eye video coming up where I'll really explain it in depth, the steps for eyes. Then we're going to go on to the nose and the tongue, put our first layers there. We'll do the ears, which are the best part because they're so fast and they're so fun. Then we'll get to the rest of the muzzle and any other layers we might need on the nose and the tongue. We have the left side of our dog is the dark side, and the right side is the light side. And then finally, to finish off with whiskers, we do not need to mask today because Leo has dark whiskers. So we're using our ink pen for whiskers and then some splatter if we think it will serve the painting. Let's go ahead and just lay down the colors that we're planning on using. I picked these colors because I just thought that it looked like it would benefit from a warm, muted vibe. Oh, and so often I try to do muted paintings and they end up vibrant. It's like I just can't help myself. I end up putting a lot of pigment down and not being able to keep it muted. So this is going to be good practice for me. I cannot guarantee that I will keep my painting muted. I'm hoping I can keep it warm. That's a little bit more controllable in my opinion. That you just don't use blue, right? So we can just stay away from blue, but I'm hoping to, instead of purple, that almost looks kind of purple, but it'll be a little bit warmer. I wonder if I picked up some blue. I don't think I did. That would be pretty. So that's going to be a good buffer color, is this mix of opera pink and neutral tint. And then we have kind of a brown, a darker brown will be the quinacridone gold with the neutral tint, and then we'll have quinacridone gold also by itself. So then we'll also have opera pink by itself, but I'm hoping opera pink is very vibrant to do a very kind of muted, watery mix of opera pink in those areas, or even mixing opera pink with our fourth color, which is buff titanium. So mixing it with buff titanium will also mute it down quite a bit. So I'm only hoping to just use these 4 colors and then of course the mixes of those colors. And it's just such a fun way to paint because then you're not so intense with all these decisions as you're painting. All right, feel free to drop in your questions and be vocal while we paint. We're starting with the eyes, which we know we like to start with giving us some nice outlines. Now, I have my reference photo loaded on my computer, and that's kind of what I like to do so I can zoom in and out as I need to see all the details. So hopefully you're able to watch the video and have the reference photo on your screen or print it out at the same time. So I have a heavy mix of neutral tint on my silver black velvet brush, and I'm going to give myself some nice outlines to work with. And making sure that we are painting around the reflections, because that's something that would be hard to get back completely if we painted thin in. Let's see, he's got some pretty, I just love his expression. I saw this photo on the website, the Humane Society website, which I shared in my email. He's just so happy. I love his look. And my son loves German Shepherds. I don't know if it's because it's a Paw Patrol thing or something. I I think that's part of it. Okay, we're going to also do the same thing we've been doing, which is using our size 6 round brush to be our plain water brush. So anytime I'm holding this blue brush, hopefully, if I don't get distracted, it'll be with just plain water. So sometimes I'll blot the brush, keep it clean, and basically I'm just pulling some of this color and softening the edges where I put some of these black outlines, because right now, while these black outlines are wet, is the best time to manipulate those edges. So we're just being cognizant of the edges as we go. But in general, you can lift. I've never had a lot of problems lifting and manipulating neutral tint even after it's dry. So I wouldn't let that get you too worried if it dries. The other thing is I usually do an ultramarine blue reflection in the pupil. We're not using blue today. So I'm going to make that, I think, the opera pink purpley color that we already mixed in. So I'm still just painting some of these black outlines. And I'm going to put the highlight next to the reflection. So these are the two reflections. And I'm going to save some space there for when we do our opera pink. And I think I'd like to just do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that opera pink. Nice heavy mix. Another size 6 round brush. Actually, that looks like it's an 8, but same thing. And I'm just putting that opera pink. And it's kind of picking up some of that neutral tint. So I'm cleaning the brush to kind of keep it not too muddled. But we also do want it to mix a little bit to create a purpley color. So these again will be right surrounding these pretty reflection areas in the eye. And then I have water now. I'm going to drop some water in to facilitate those two to mix on their own and get really pretty. And I'm also going to just mix a little bit more too. We don't want him to have red eyes. So we're going to see that looks a little kind of is demonic, too harsh of a word. But I also wanted there to be some color. So let's see if I can even, grabbing a new size 6 round brush with my yellow tape, and that will be the color. I'll put use quinacridone gold with this brush. Let's see if maybe adding some quinacridone gold will make it look a little less intense. And I really do like how that looks right there. Okay, I'm tempted to do the iris too at the same time. This is getting nice and dry. It's still a little wet up here. But let's go in with a heavy mix, but also a pretty saturated brush of quinacridone gold, so that it kind of pools a little bit as we put it on the iris. You can see how there's quite a bit on the paper. And I'm not afraid to touch the dry edges of that neutral tint. I kind of want to soften them as I go in with this color. And even let them blend in a little bit with the quinacridone gold. That's kind of cool. That's pretty neat. I like that. I'm going to maybe lift out a little bit. I have this is my water only brush, but it also works very well for lifting. So I lifted some, and now I'm going to just plop some water in there. Hopefully that will push the pigment out to the edges a little bit. And lifting at the same time. Just giving that eye some dimension, making it look like there's a little highlight right there. The other thing we can do, now I'm kind of working fast, and I'm able to because the amount of paint I put down with that neutral tint is minimal, so it's starting to dry. So what I want to do is soften this edge too. So I'm just adding some water. Kind of a water heavy application here. Cleaning my brush because there's this pretty highlight kind of under his eye, but it's still in this black area. So I'm just emphasizing that highlight, but I don't want it to be too harsh. So I want it to be softer. Okay, that looks really good for right now. I think we'll come back in, soften this reflection, and get another layer of neutral tint on that eye. So now we can do the same thing on the other eye. Let's see, we got his pupil, his iris, and then we have this area, the black area. And he's got a cute little highlight right there. This is all very dark. All right, let's see here. Just checking on my, cool, all right. Audio is missing. Audio issues, yeah, it's probably because thank you guys for letting me know. This will be the first live where I'm using my mic or my laptop. Okay, I apologize, that was probably loud. All right, I moved my computer a little bit more towards me. I'll try to talk louder. I'm hoping that is better. So continue to give me feedback on the sound. That's very helpful. I'm going to keep going with his eye. And my laptop too is kind of loud with its fan. So it's not an ideal sound situation. I'll have to get that figured out for the next slide. So now we have our pupil here too, and our reflections. He's got quite a nice reflective area in his pupil. Oh my goodness. Can you turn my phone on mute? I apologize. That freaked me out. Probably freaked you guys out too. Okay. Technology issues today. Holy moly. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So we're doing the same thing. Some nice darks down here. And we're going to come in with our opera pink and do some of that purple right next to the reflections in his eye. This eye has a lot of reflections, but we don't want to give him too many because then it's going to lose some of that. I don't know, it's going to look like a planet Earth or something funny. Something weird. I'm going to fill in this one too. All right, coming in too with some quinacridone. So it's not too intense of a pink reflection. I don't know if I've ever done this. So I'm trying to do like a warm reflection in their eye. I'm gonna see. I really hope it works. We'll find out. Okay, just kind of refining some of these from this black area. Giving myself a little bit of a outline system to work with. And coming in with our wet brush too to soften these edges. That's really soft. That's really intense. There we go. That's pretty. All right. This is still very wet, so I'm not going to do the iris yet on that one. It would just go everywhere, I think, if I did that. I'm trying to talk loud enough to that you guys can hear me on my laptop. I hope you can. So I'm just coming in with another layer here on the pupil of the eye, this eye, since it's much more dry now. And I'm gonna soften this too. See if we can fix that up. Just make it a little thinner of an outline. It looks a little thick. It just kind of looks cartoony in a way, I think. Right here. So I just wanted to get it a little thinner, and then I'll plop in some more quinacridone too. And I might even put a tiny bit of quinacridone down here and see if I can blend that in and make this highlight a little bit even. A little bit of opera pink, maybe I can get it kind of a purpley color. Maybe this painting will be a lesson in why I use purple. Well, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. It's all fun though, you get to paint. This is cool. I like what's happening. We'll see if I can keep that, if that'll work. I kind of like that, what's happening over there. And I'm just lifting out a little bit of that extra to keep it fresh, to keep it light and luminous. We'll see how that looks. I like that a lot. That's pretty. Let's see if we can check in. It's a little better now. Okay, good. Good. That's awesome. Yes, no, you guys can go, you can come back. I'll be here for a while. And we're just painting, we're just having fun. So I'm gonna wait for this eye a touch to dry and move on to the nose. Let's just do one layer on his nose. My reference photo is still quite dark on the nose, and I'm sure yours is too. So don't be afraid to adjust it. I'm adjusting mine in Canva a little bit. Actually, I could show you what I'm doing. So I'm adjusting mine in Canva just a tiny bit so I can see where his nose is. It's a little tricky I turn my brightness all the way up. Okay, that's good enough. Just so we can kind of tell where his nose is. It's difficult because this is a really low resolution photo, but it's going to be worth it. The expression is on point. So I'm going to keep going here, do a little layer on his nose. While we wait for that to dry. So I like to do the same thing with noses typically as I do with eyes because it's an area of high detail. So I'll go in, just give myself black outlines. So using a heavy mix of neutral tint, filling in everywhere I see the darkest darks. Okay, that looks really good. I'm surprised. No, sometimes I am. All right, we're kind of still waiting for those eyes to dry, and now we have to wait for the nose to dry, these areas. So let's see, can you see the tongue? There we go. I'm going to do the 3-step process on the tongue. Well, actually, probably just the first 2 steps to get our first layer on the tongue. So let's go ahead and paint the tongue with water. I'm going to tint it just a little bit. I want you to be able to see my water, where it's going. So I'm almost painting up to this edge, but I'm going to come in with my grainer brush to pull color to give that edge that furriness that it needs. So I don't need to go quite all the way to that top edge. And then I will go all the way to the edges of his teeth at the bottom. So I like to even, with tongues that go into the gum line on dogs that are very happy like this, I will try to get that water to keep going past and into the gums on the bottom. And that will just end up making it look really cool. So go ahead and even paint below the teeth. We're not painting, make sure you don't paint any water on the teeth yet. So go ahead and paint that lower gum line in water too. And don't be afraid to use a lot of water. You're probably going to need it for this color to move freely once we add the color in step 2. But that looks really good. You can see it's already kind of granulating, and that's so pretty. I'm actually going to keep going, getting more and more ambitious, but I don't want these 2 edges to touch. So I'm bringing up a little bit into the gum line, but I'm not crossing this border, this kind of line here. I'll do the same on this side, go around this tooth and kind of up into this gum area around there's some teeth right here. But I'm not going to let the tongue and the gum line on the sides touch. So hopefully we have enough water there. And I'm also trying to practice a little bit of restraint with my opera pink because we were going for that muted color. But when I add buff titanium, that will go a long way to taming down the opera pink. So we don't need a ton of opera pink. I put a little bit on my brush, but a little bit goes a long way. And I'm working with my opera pink brush now and facilitating it to move all the way to the edges to give those teeth a nice edge so we can tell where the teeth are. And you kind of have to say, hey, you can go over here and you can go over here and keep it moving along so that it goes into these places we want it to go. I'm going to pick up a little bit more opera pink because he's got some pink gums over here and he's got some pink gums over here and of course right below his teeth. And this does not look muted yet, but it will. We'll mute it down. And I'm hoping these blend together a little bit in these areas where between the teeth could look really cool. I'm going to take my quinacridone gold brush, heavy mix of quinacridone gold, but we're not going to lay it down too much. I'm just going to tap in some areas where I think he could benefit from a little bit of a highlight. That's probably all I need to do with that. Let's do buff titanium next. So I'm going to grab another brush, blot it, and get a nice heavy mix of buff titanium. And just trying to scrub some of it off. It was very dry in my palette. So this I'm hoping will mute the colors a little bit so that it's not so fluorescently pink. And it will also look really cool. I just love the way that buff titanium behaves. let's see, this is black, so we'll just keep that right there. So tapping it into and letting it kind of mix on its own. I need a heavy mix, but I also need a pretty wet brush. Otherwise, it's going to lift up my water instead of dropping down pigment. So going in here and kind of moving things around, letting it move around, dropping it in and just letting it, because how cool would that be? I mean, it won't dry that cool. It's going to keep blending, but pretty neat. I love a little bit of buff titanium. Okay, now we can go in with our neutral tint up here on the top for that shadow. The only thing is it's really pooling up here, so I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the water at the top because there's kind of a lot. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so I have a heavy mix of neutral tint, and I'm just going to just plop some up at the top where there's this clear shadow inside of his mouth on the top. And that looks intense right now, but we will soften it in. I'm gonna, well, let's see, I do want to add a little bit here too, because we do have this black in his gums too. And I'd like to get a little bit of that in there while it's wet, so it mixes. And we'll come back and do another layer of black too. But this could look really cool if we give it some time to mix as well. So a heavy mix with a wet brush, not sopping wet, but it's got enough water on it. And coming around and letting these areas mix together with the neutral tint. And I'm going to put a nice little layer down here too. Now I'm going to go in with my wet brush, but I've blotted it, just barely blotted it. I want to have some water on there. And we're going to see if we can mix and soften this part without over mixing it. I do like that. That looks cool. Let's see. And now at this point too, you can kind of work with it. And depending on what your colors are doing, because they could very likely be doing different things than mine, work with it however you think it needs to be manipulated. So lifting, blending, picking up pools. The other thing we need to do too is get this furry edge. So I'm just going to wet my grainer brush and blot it, and then pull that color out. It's very wet, so I might have to blot my brush quite a bit. And just give it that furry edge at the top. And I'm going to kind of do it over here too, because he's got those furry edges right there. And up here. And I have my, let's see, this is my neutral tint. Okay, I'm going to grab my blotted brush and my water brush. Probably still has some neutral tint on it. And I'm going to see, I'm going to show you guys something if this will work. If you, okay, I don't have enough water, but sometimes when you let go, you can kind of see how it pools at the bottom if I just let go right there. So what I'll often do is if I'm trying to make a line of sorts, I'll pull it back and let go back into the pool. So this is just those cute lines that dogs have on their tongue. So I'm pulling some color down, but then I'm pulling it back a little bit so that it doesn't give me quite a big pool at the bottom. Okay, what I think I want to do is I'm going to take my black neutral tint brush and kind of blot most of the black off, but then come back and make sure it's still wet enough to see if I can mix some of these colors together. I have to be careful because his tongue isn't really black down here. There we go. And he's got, I think I get this cute tooth area. He's got some more lines coming down. He's got, in general, a little bit more purple right here. And some more lines. And I'm just going to pull a little bit more of that line, make it really obvious. Kind of got crazy right there. Let's see. I'm going to actually drop some water right there to lift up where that line went and to lift up this little highlight in his tongue. So it'll help me lift and it'll push some of that pigment to the edges, which could look really pretty. That looks really good. I'm going to do the same, drop a little water in here, lift. And I just kind of want to mix this because I really am hoping to get more of a muted look. But this would be a great painting to get a vibrant look with these colors. You could definitely achieve that as we already have. We're just trying to get it a little bit calmer. All right, so I have, let's see, how much neutral tint do I have on this? I have a pretty good amount. So I'm going to come in and kind of keep working on this while it's wet. Oops, I went into that tooth a little bit. It's actually a little bit of a, there we go. Kind of went into the tooth over here too. Trying to keep those teeth nice and smooth if I can. This is looking really fun. I'm not quite sure everything else I have to do here. Just trying to make it look like his gums right now. Popping some neutral tint there. I want it to look like the photo, but also want to give myself the freedom to let it be really watercolory and do what it wants to do. So I like how that color is kind of getting pushed out there. So I'm just dropping in a little water and I'm going to see what happens. This is intense. This looks cool, but it's kind of intense. So I'm just going to drop in a little bit more water and maybe leave it alone here and maybe let it go around. And I'm liking that. That looks cool. Let's see if I can do, it's getting pretty dry right here. So this is risky business, but I'm taking my buff titanium brush and muting that upper pink a little bit more. I really like this. It's pretty intense, but I love it. So I'm going to see if I just, I'm going to keep it and see if I still like it down the road. So giving these teeth some nice smooth edges. All right, that looks really good. Okay, I'm happy with that for our first layer on the tongue. Now we can go back to the eyes. Hope you guys are still with me. Okay. Cool. Quality is good for me. Okay, awesome. You're working and watching painting videos. That's so fun. Okay, cool. Let's keep going on the eyes. Thank you for keeping me in the loop about how it's going in the chat. I'm going to move this back down. There we go. So now you can see the eyes again. Let's go ahead and add in our pretty iris on this eye. So that's my water brush. Let's do my quinacridone gold brush. And I'm going to get a heavy mix of quinacridone gold on a watery brush. And, you know, it's watery, but you can always just get a little bit of that water off by tapping it, kind of rubbing it on the side of your palette if you need to. And I'm going to go all throughout that iris shape that we saved. And the edges are dry, so I'm not really that afraid to touch the edges because I do want to soften them. So it's kind of a good twofer. Soften the edges and lay down the color. And then I want to lift out a little bit around the edges with my watery brush here, my blotted brush that I use for water. That looks really good. Really happy with that. I'm going to go in and soften here too. I'm going to be careful not to touch the iris that we just filled in though. So I'm just softening this shape so it looks more like a highlight, kind of an abstract highlight. And I'm going to do the same thing here, put a little bit of water to soften it, and then I'm going to drop in some opera pink. I think that would look good right there. So a little bit of opera pink along these edges. Give it a little color, a little of that purpley color that we want. I really like, you can see, I hope you can kind of see what happened right here, where that neutral tint kind of went into the iris. So pretty. That looks so cool. So now I'm just going to soften the reflections. Just make them look really glassy and nice. And you can pick up some color around the reflections as you go and bring it into the reflection too if you need to. I like that. See if I can bringing in a little bit more neutral tint and some of that, just pulling a little color in because this reflection especially has color in it. It's not pure white. So we're kind of pulling some of that in there, but not on the whole thing. Kind of wanted to just move around in different ways. See if we can do that. I'm going to add a tiny bit of opera pink and see if I can manipulate that to move around. That looks cool. So we can do the same thing over here since these are dry too. Pull a little color in and soften those edges around the reflections. And that's pretty intense pink in his eye that I'm not too crazy about, so I'm going to add a little of that neutral tint to see if I can dot some of that in there. and then mix it around with my flat brush. I like that. That looks cool. It's still pretty intense, isn't it? See if we can add a little quinacridone and a little bit more neutral tint. I like that. That looks better. Okay, while we're here, pull this up a tiny bit. We're going to go ahead and do another layer on his nose. This is fun. Okay, let's do a layer on his nose. So we're going to do the paint with water. And with noses, I'll typically paint with a round brush instead of a big flat brush. And we're going to save a little bit of white space around the nostrils. I'm going to tint this. I want you guys to be able to see. I'll tint it with, what we're going to do, we're going to do a pretty highlight. So I'll tint it with opera pink. Okay. So I'm leaving some white space around the nostrils. And I'm moving into this side. I have some little white areas there. And I'm going to kind of leave, kind of go over here. And let's see, up here a little bit too. Yeah, that looks really good. Maybe up here a little bit. Okay, that looks nice. I like that. So this is our funky nose shape that we got, but we're gonna we need these highlights over here, so that's why we didn't paint there just yet. So let's see if we can do a little opera pink. I'm kind of trying to get the pink over on the light side more so. But, well, yeah, let's put it all over the top because we're going to make this more purpley with the black. So we'll come in with our opera pink all over here. This is going to be kind of our color part of the nose. Then we'll do buff titanium. Just to mute it down a little bit. So we're going to mix that in pretty. Okay, and then we'll come in with our neutral tint. So another heavy mix, but on our wet brush. I'm just getting a little bit of extra paint off. We don't need a ton. And we're going to start over here and see if we can blot it. I don't want this to be too heavy with the neutral tint. So I'm just blotting some of that off and then mixing it as we go here. All right, taking my wet brush, I'm going to go ahead and drop in some water and see if we can get a little bit of mixing happening. Little pretty mixes. That's really pretty. So his nose really kind of extends into his snout quite a bit. So now what we can do is both pull color, we're going to paint with color up onto his snout, and let some of that color run into the snout area. And we might need to what do we need to do? Add more color maybe? I left a little white space here. We're going to see if we still like that. But I kind of like that. And just let some of this paint travel into these reflective areas while it's still wet. And I really, really like what that's doing. That looks really cool. So I do like this purple color we were able to achieve. I didn't quite know what to expect with these three colors mixing. I thought maybe buff titanium was starting to take over there because it kind of looked like it was. I'm going to go ahead and mix up more of that color for this purple part of his snout. So we did the opera pink first. We came in with a little buff titanium and muted it over. And then we are coming in with some neutral tint and letting that just mix in together. And just putting it, just kind of giving his snout a little bit of an outline here, letting it run into that wet area a little bit. Taking advantage of these edges while they're still wet to give it a little bit of an outline with this neutral tint is really fun. Let's see if we can come in and push that back a little bit. That got kind of intense. And drop in a little water. I love this granulation that's happening. This is really, really pretty. I like this. So I'm going to drop in some water and hope that that neutral tint comes to play a little bit more than it is. We want to invite it to the color party here. So we want that purple to show up. Very cool. I really like what's happening there, and we can come back and add another layer down the road. Cool. I like his big nose. It's so big. Love a big nose. I'm gonna maybe, I do want this to be a little bit differentiated. So I'm coming in with some neutral tint here. I'm giving myself a little bit more of a layer, making this a little darker so that we can tell that this is more his nose than his snout. Yeah, I like that. Just a little bit of a definition on that. That looks good. We can come back and lift those edges if they're getting a little crazy. Okay, let's move on. Let's do his ears, and then we'll do the final layer on his snout. Let's see. He's got really big ears, right? Cool. Oh, and ears are the funnest thing to paint. So we're having a good time now. Yeah, oh yeah, mistakes happen. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, in a lot of times, like I can't predict what watercolor is going to do every time. You know, as you mix colors and you learn, everything's just kind of trying stuff. So top of the ears go way down, kind of over here. You can see that one top here, and then it goes cool. You can see all that. So I am going to kind of dab the base of my water bucket. Put that up up here so you guys can see it. All right, cool. So ears are super fun. We love ears. We love ears. I'm going to put my reference photo on full screen. Here we go. So we're going to facilitate this pretty purple color in the ears too. And with ears, you got to keep in mind our light side and our dark side. So we're going to try to aim for more gold and more buff titanium and more purple on the dark side ear. So I'm going to use my big 1-inch wash brush to lay down the water. Ears are a 3-step process. So I'm just going to tint it with a little opera pink again so you can see where it's going. And I'm going to go almost all the way to that edge. Not quite, because we're going to come in with our neutral tint and work on those edges too. And then we're going to go basically to where we see those black fur areas start on the ears. And I'm going to come in and put in that gold part too. So that's kind of where I painted on this ear. I left some white space there for the neutral tint. And I'm just going to make sure it's really nice and wet. Same thing on this side. I'm going to tint it a little bit. There we go, like that. Almost all the way to the edges. And then going kind of where we see the first black fur start. On this side and into that gold area too. Pretty, really pretty. Let's take our neutral tint brush, our size 6 round. I'm going to clean it off a little bit because I think there was some buff titanium on there. Let's get it nice and wet. I'll show you this neutral tint here. Heavy mix of neutral tint. And you also want to make sure your brush is wet, because if you have like a heavy mix but your brush is dry, it's just going to lift up the water we put down. It's going to be thirsty and want to take the water instead of being like giving it away. So let's go ahead and we're going to go, now we're going to put that neutral tint all the way to the edge of the ear. Give it that pretty smooth edge. And get a little bit here. Ears, you have so much more freedom to be abstract. This is where that contrast piece really comes into play, where you get to let watercolor be really watercolory. I'm going to put more up here because he's got, put more right here. There we go. But you have so much more freedom without losing any kind of the realism that you need for it to be a dog, right? Oh wow, it was so fun. Okay, this year we're going for more purple. So let's actually add a little bit more neutral tint to the watery part of it here. Okay, cool. Then we're going to add in our opera pink. And I'm going to mix it. I'm going to help it mix. I'm going to help it play to get that purpley color we're after. And then this one, we want a little bit of that gold, but not as much as we're going to put on that ear. So I'm going to plop a little bit there and a little bit there and let those mix in. And buff titanium is the coolest color ever for what it does on wet paper. So we're going to see if we can throw in a little bit buff titanium. and let it come out to play there. And then of course we have our grainer brush, so we can blotting it here. If you have a lot of pooling, it won't quite give you super distinguished bristly edges, but just do your best with it. I don't want to blot too much of that pooling out because that's where the color mixing happens in really cool ways. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more buff titanium right there. The other thing you can do is pull color with your, put that up a little bit, with your palette knife to give some hairy edges. I'm gonna maybe, where's my, there it is, my water brush. Just pull this line in just a little bit. There we go. Let it mix right there with that area. I'll do the same over here. Put in a little bit of water to soften that black edge. But I like that little white space right there. We'll see if I still like that later. And pull some of that black. These furry little bits of his ears. And the other thing you can do while it's just chilling is drop in a little bit more water and let it play. Let it hang out. How fun is that? Isn't it crazy how fast it goes? Okay, as fast as it was, we need to add a little bit more water over here. So I'm gonna pull some of this pool up, spread it around a little bit. Make sure there's enough water for our paint to move around. Movement is magic. Come up with all these different kinds of sayings as we go. We're having too much fun, getting goofy. Okay, let's do neutral tint. Same thing. We're doing the same thing, but this is the light side here. So less purple, more gold, more buff titanium. Now I'm going to go all the way to the edge with this neutral tint. I kind of want a really thin line of neutral tint right here. I can achieve that. And he's got a lot of black. His black kind of extends over there and then comes down right here. So we're going to put a nice line of black right there. And some nice black right here. I gotta move this down a little bit. What does that look like? That looks really cool. He's got some cool black going on right there. Let me just extend that a little bit. Okay, and then the black on this side of the ear. Oops, sorry about that. That was probably loud. It's really neat because it kind of is this thin little line. And I'm even going to extend my water out a little bit so that it gets closer to how thin I want to paint the black on that side. So I want to just paint a nice thin line right here. Kind of going in there, and then it gets nice and out here. Want that water to get next to it though. There we go. Really cool. Let's come in with our quinacridone. So I'm just, hope you can see that. Just picked up a little bit. My brush isn't that wet. I'm just going to kind of tap it in all the way down to the neutral tint color. Need it a little bit wet. bring in some right here. Look at how it pushes. That's cool. Sometimes I forget what colors do what, but man, that color really likes to be the boss. Push it around. So let's go in with our opera pink. And let's see, I like it over here, and then it kind of goes down. So our opera pink definitely still has some neutral tint on the brush, but that's really pretty. Let's go in with just our wet brush. See if we can let those mix a little bit. It's funny because that quinacridone really pushes the water away and then it dries really fast. That's really interesting. Let's go in with a little bit of buff titanium too. And we got to think about our edges as well. It's super pooled right here. I'm just going to pick a little bit up because I won't even be able to pull color into furry edges with that much water down here. That's a lot. I like this lifted area right here. It's kind of unpainted area. It's really pretty. So I'm going to actually lift a little bit more off, especially because this is the light side here. So I'm just taking my blotted brush, my big brush, so I can get a lot done in a short amount of time, and lifting a little bit of that pigment right where it's the light, the lightest area of the ears. So lifting out. And I usually overlift because that color is going to come back in towards this lifted area. And that's just pulling a lot. So I'm just lifting a little bit out right there. Kind of cleaning my brush there. That looks really pretty. I might try to lift out a little bit on this side while it's drying. And we'll come back in once this dries and add a little bit more greener brush. Fur too, I think would look good. And that got pretty intense, didn't it? I'm even going to put a little bit of pink right there. So I didn't want this ear to have too much. I'm sorry if I'm talking quietly because I know my microphone's kind of far away. I didn't want too much orange in this ear, so I'm adding a little bit more pink. And dropping some water. Just want to make that mix in a little bit better. Okay, I'm just making sure I don't want to scrape. I don't want to do color resist because now would be the time to do that. And we don't need to scrape, I don't think. I mean, it could be nice for some of these areas because he does have some fur, you know, going up here. So we'll see if we can scrape in some of that fur area. That does look nice. We don't need to go crazy on the scraping, I don't think. And you can't see these scraping lines right away, but I'm hoping that the pigment will move into the divots that we're basically creating by scraping and give it some more of that texture we're looking for. I do like how that looked right there. See, add a little bit on this side. Apologize if you can't see where I'm scraping. That's giving it a lot of texture. It looks really cool. I do love color resist. It's hard to not do it. So let's do it with our quinacridone gold first and see if we can get some little areas of really pretty color. And it has to be basically almost dry for this to really pop. So we're going to see if we can achieve that. Oh, I like that. It's kind of already happening up here. I'm just leaning into that. This is like the perfect lightness level over here. Kind of almost doing a little bit of negative painting at the same time. That was too dry. That didn't really go anywhere. So I'm just gonna blot that in. It's just so cool. It's just so cool to see what it does as it dries. I like that. Maybe negative painting with opera pink on this side. I might even just touching it into the neutral tint. So we have opera pink and a little bit of neutral tint on our brush. We're gonna see if we can get some color resist with that. Fun. Really fun, and I think it looks really good. All right, now we gotta think about, we got steps. So we could finish our muzzle and then we can do the light side and the dark side. And we're gonna get there pretty quick. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Oops. I'm just trying to get my reference photo on my computer here. There we go. He's got to be the happiest dog ever, right? So fun. So I'm going to move my painting up here again. Finish off his muzzle here with a few layers. It's going to be so cool to zoom out and show you how this looks at the end. Really fun, really fun. Okay, let's start with the 3-step process. I'm just gathering up my brushes again here, getting everything ready. Remember, light side over here, dark side over here. So let's go ahead and paint with water. And let's start with our dark side. So right now we're doing the muzzle, and then we'll like do the rest of the body, dark side and light side. But usually the muzzle needs a few layers. You can come back and add an extra texture technique. So that's why I kind of want to do this first. So I'm tinting the water again. Again, you do not have to do this part. I just want you to see where I'm putting the water. Oftentimes when I'm laying down sections of water like this, I'll touch edges and then, but do it kind of sparingly and randomly, so that I can still kind of control the edge a little bit, but make it look somewhat watery and give the watercolor a little bit of room to do the cool things that it does. All right. I think I'm going to come in with my neutral tint right away. And I kind of have a watery mix of it. I'm going to see if I can lay down a little bit of the color, because we're working with our dark side. It's hard. This reference photo really is not giving us a lot of information. So I have my opera pink that we already kind of were mixing with neutral tint. So dropping in some of that too, to make this pretty purpley color. I don't know if we're going to achieve the super pastel look I was hoping for, but I do like how we are getting a purple from the opera pink and neutral tint, and it's a pretty like wine purple. It's really pretty. I like it. Okay, so let's just soften this in a little bit towards the nose and towards the muzzle. And now, as it dries, we can come in with our grainer brush and add in some details. So it's pretty dark right here, and then it also is pretty dark out here. So I'm picking up a little bit more neutral tint. And then we're going to kind of come in, and you know how they have those like rows of whiskers? So we're going to just try to see if we can determine where those are, since the reference photo is not giving us that information. And I'm going to blot it. So it's pretty blotted, but there should be a like heavy mix of color on there. See if I can get a couple more of these furry edges happening. And sometimes it helps me to look at, I'm going to grab something. But it helps me to look at another painting. So we have, this is a big one too, but if you can see on Moose's snout, right, the furriness of it. So that's what we're going to try to achieve with Leo, is a snout similar to this, where we have those furry edges and a few layers. Apologize. I have a lot of stuff to maneuver. Okay. All right, so I just put that in a place where I can see it. I'm going to add another light here. There we go. So obviously Leo's snout is darker, but it helps me to just look at something that I painted in the past to give me a little bit of a roadmap. And the nose on Moose, very similar to the snout on this German Shepherd. So just giving it some texture around the nose and where the whiskers are. Very happy with that. Obviously, we'll do more layers. I could even come in maybe and emphasize some of the dots. Still pretty wet though, so it's going to spread probably more than I'd like it to. Okay. Let's do the same thing. I'm trying to think. Sometimes the light side looks really good with just a few brush strokes. So what we're going to do on the light side of the muzzle is we'll do a similar thing towards the center of his mouth, but then make it more abstract as we go towards the outside of his snout. Okay, and then we're also going to move into more of a gold color on this side, if we can. It's always easier said than done. Just looking at how my ears are drying. Sometimes you can do stuff as the ears dry. Trying to think. Then I'd have to move my painting again to show you. I'm gonna wait on the ears. They look really good. So let's go in. Let's do a little base of the gold. So let's see if we can just get some of that gold in there before we put the neutral tint in. Make it kind of pretty. So I have a really watery, kind of hardly any pigment on my brush here. I'm just putting in some of these brush strokes there. And now I'm just kind of blurring these things together. Let's go in with just well, let's do a little bit of opera pink. That purpley opera pink color. Has neutral tint and opera pink on the brush here. And giving it a little bit just to blend these two edges together. But in general, we're going to do a lot less on the light side than we do on the dark side, if we can get away with it and not overwork it. So now I have my neutral tint grainer brush. Going to do a similar thing, but more suggest the whiskers happening. I don't want to do too much if I can manage not to do too much. And then just softening it out a little bit with my wet brush. And I want it maybe to mix a little bit more than it is. It looks a little tie-dye right now. So we'll just let it mix a little bit more here. Cool, that looks really good. I think we can come in now and just refine these details in the mouth. So heavy mix of neutral tint, and I blotted, well, like just swipe it, so kind of blotted brush. We don't need any pooling because we're going for detail right now. So I'm going to go around this tooth here. I'm going to go right up to the black that we painted. And I'm going to keep my grainer brush handy here for that furry edge. There we go. And around the tooth, and then right next to the tongue. So I'm just painting the rest of the gums right up into they make the tongue. and right around the tooth too. You gotta take your time here and just give yourself some space to work around and make these detail areas. It just takes time because you want to be careful. Isn't this neat how this granulated? So we're going to try to keep some of that, not paint over it, but still give us some nice edges. So the other thing we can have in our hand is our wet brush so that we can smooth some of these edges as we go. So I'm just smoothing the edge that meets the gums. I don't want to paint over too much those really beautiful granulations that we got. And the other cool thing is you don't have to be perfect. Because sometimes just suggesting things makes them more interesting than actually painting the whole thing of the thing. So we're giving ourselves a little bit of depth by adding this black layer right around the teeth. But we're keeping those beautiful, really beautiful granulations that we got. I'm just going to smooth that tooth right here. This is why you want to go slow. And let's see, and then I want to give it a little bit of a, if we can see, okay. So similar to Moose, he has this beautiful lower lip that kind of extends into like a furry edge at the bottom. So I'm going to just make that happen as well. So I'm going to go up here. This is all dry, so I'm just doing a heavy mix on our dry paper. But before the paint dries, softening this edge. Bring it into the lip a little bit. And bring this up, giving that lip some dimension. I like how sometimes their lips have these like pretty little lines. So I want to make sure I have that too. So bring this down. I'm talking quietly again. I apologize. I hope you can hear me, but yeah, so we're just adding some definition with our neutral tint to make it so it's a lip. So you can just tell that it's his pretty little lip right here. And then what we're going to do too is saturate that lower line that we painted. Again, I'm kind of keeping the darks on the dark side, but also it's his lip, you know, so we kind of just have to paint it how it looks. And then we're going to pull that color down because he's got this cute little furry edge, the furry lower lip area. And it's really hard to see that, but he does have it a little bit. Just that furry kind of edge right there. So then we're just going to keep going and keep just refining where we see it needs more of that neutral tint. So he has some teeth over here and filling this in with some gum. And of course, it's kind of furry at the top. You can even come in, I'm having kind of a hard time getting a really fine line with my Princeton brush right now. It's pretty old and that can happen too. And I'm not very kind to my brushes. So sometimes I come in and refine the edges with this size 2 brush. So here we go, like this. And making those teeth shape, that shape of the teeth here, abstract too. There you go. That's looking so fun. And I'm coming in where there's already neutral tint and making it a tad darker. And I have to think. So this, I think, is mostly his fur up here. It's kind of coming in the furry area and not so much his gum line. So what I'm going to do is saturate this edge of the neutral tint and make it a little bit more obvious that this is fur coming out over here. Giving it a little furriness right here. And I'm even going to just wet my grainer brush and continue that furry edge up to where his mouth is. So I'm loading it with a little bit of neutral tint and kind of getting the right consistency on my brush where the bristles separate and I have the right mix of color on there. That looks good. It's a little dark. So I'm going to just lift some of that out. And soften it a little bit too, especially because this is the light side of his mouth. So we're a little bit more suggestive on the light side and we're definitely lighter on the light side. That looks cool. I like that lifting. I like how you can kind of get a little bit of an outline too. I think that looks really pretty. All right, so I'm going to finish off this muzzle area with the neutral tint. And I'm just softening the neutral tint into the gums that we already painted. I'm trying to keep some of these really pretty areas of where we dropped in water and where the pigment ran together. And then if there's any area that needs a little bit of an outline, we kind of made pigment when it got pushed to the edges already made a little bit of an outline, which is really beautiful. So ideally I don't mess that up too much, but I'm kind of smoothing it out in certain areas. It is more muted. The cool thing too is we're going for a muted look. The good thing about watercolor in that way is that it dries lighter automatically. So it's already kind of getting back to this look that I was hoping for at the beginning. The other thing we need to do is add another layer of neutral tint to the very top of the tongue, because that value difference there is a big part of creating the dimension of his mouth. So I added a little layer there. I'm going to come in with my blotted wet brush and soften the edge into the rest of his tongue here. And then I'm also going to take my grainer brush and pull that up a little bit into the furriness of his snout. That looks really good. I'm going to do just a tiny bit more of a shadow here because the shadow kind of extends down as well. So we want to make sure we have a shadow that really makes his tongue look dimensional and his mouth look dimensional. So now I'm just softening that in. So it's not too harsh. Kind of pulling it down to that line of his tongue too looks really cool. And then the last thing we have to do, you can glaze too if you want to make this more vibrant. You could put more opera pink on it or whatever. But the last thing we really have to do is just soften around the teeth. Because right now they look really intense and they kind of just look unfinished. So I just take my blotted brush and I pull a little bit of color into a soft edge around the teeth. And the other thing is, like, especially this tooth in the back is really in quite the shadow, so you don't have to be afraid to pull in quite a bit of color on that tooth. This is still, no, it's not, I don't think it's too wet. Don't soften when your color is too wet, because it's just going to bleed into the tooth a lot. The color is still kind of a little bit wet on here. You can kind of see that as I'm going around the edge, it's bleeding into the tooth. So then if that happens, you just have to babysit it a little bit as it dries and lift color as it dries. Otherwise, it'll just keep kind of going into the tooth. This tooth is also in shadow, so I am going to pull a little bit of color, kind of giving it some dimension. You kind of see that in the reference photo a little bit. So again, just pulling a little bit more color out before it dries too dark. And you can even soften a little bit around the tongue too. And that ends up just making it look a little more polished, if that's the word. Not super harsh. Oh, this was probably, is that still wet? I'm not sure. Sometimes you learn as you go. I'm even going to tiny bit of quinacridone just to make these teeth look a little bit more realistic. I don't know whose dog has perfectly white teeth. And I've noticed that especially on human portraits, it looks weird if you give them perfectly white teeth. So even a little buff titanium could help make it look more realistic. It's a cool way to smooth the edges too, make it really tight. Just polish. I think polish is the word. It's what they do at the dentist, and that's what we're doing now for little Leo, which is also my son's name. Super cute. Maybe that's why I had to paint him. I was like, well, we should just get this dog. We're gonna get a dog someday, but not yet. We don't really have. I don't have the bandwidth to care for a dog just yet. We have 4 cats, which make us very, very happy. So that's what we're gonna start with. All right. Sometimes you don't need to soften in that much. Sometimes it looks cool too when you do have these like, doing it on my hand. Just the way that watercolor dries around edges can look really neat. How we have some pigment that just kind of went into these areas. I think that looks cool. So the amount that you soften is interpretive, and you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. I'm going to soften though more so around the bottom edges of the teeth to give them a little shape. So just pulling color into like a line around the bottom of the teeth. That looks really great. And then I'm just putting a little bit more water to make these teeth tiny bit softer. That looks cool. I'm going to come in with a little quinacridone again. A watery mix to see if I can just make the teeth a little bit more of a realistic color. How cool is that? I just love the dimension you can create in a snout like this. Like an open mouth snout. Just so cool. So you can do whatever your snout needs in terms of darkening the neutral tint and softening the edges of the teeth. You can see I added neutral tint over here and this edge was still wet, so it was starting to bleed into it. So I'm just coming in and trying to lift it. You kind of have to babysit this now. I do. Because it'll keep moving towards that wet area. So I'm just lifting a little bit, and I gotta keep my eye on that. Hopefully I remember to keep my eye on that. Let's do the same thing up here of giving this nose a little bit more dimension with neutral tint. So I'm going to come in with a heavy mix on a nice wet brush and do the same thing where I'm going to add in some neutral tint here and soften it. The other thing I want to do too is soften these reflections. So I'm making the dark side especially darker and coming in and pulling some color into those reflections too. And I'm gonna do a nice swatch. I think what I'm gonna do is mix up some of that purple. Because now that we're working in a smaller area, sometimes it's hard to facilitate a mix in such a small space. So I'm gonna see how this turns out, giving it some purple over here. And then, well, of course I use my wet brush to do that. So let's mix it in, soften the edges a little bit. It looks really cool. I really like putting that purple right on there. I'm going to put some over here too. And soften it in. But we got a lot of water right there. There we go. Soften it in here. And then while we're at it, let's see if we can mix up some gold over here. So quinacridone and a little bit of neutral tint. It's really green, isn't it? I don't know if I'm crazy about that. I actually don't like that at all. That's not very pretty. Let's see. That's so green. I'm getting a new black from Core, carbon black. That's supposed to be just black, which is what I originally thought neutral tint was, but it's not. We'll see if I like how that mixes better. Okay, what we're gonna do, let's just do a swath. A swath. Doesn't even make any sense. A swatch of gold. If we can manage to not get green over here. And opera pink will help with that. Opera pink is our buffer color for today, guys. I like these lines. I'm wondering if they're too harsh. I think I need to sit on that a little bit because they look cool, but they're also kind of intense. And let's do a little more opera pink. That's pretty. I do like how that nose kind of goes from gold to purple in that way. It's very pretty. Okay. I have to not do everything all the time. Everything, everywhere, all at once. I didn't like that movie. I couldn't even finish it. I didn't like it at all. Okay. Now we're just kind of adding value dimension here and making the nose look a little bit accurate. We can come in and lift too. I like lifting around the nostrils, looks really soft, looks really nice. And we'll be able to be a little bit more successful with lifting once it's fully dry, because the pigment won't just automatically come right back into it. Let's move on to the dark side. And then we can always come back and add another layer. We'll probably need to add some layers to the ears and to the muzzle. I'm going to check the chat, see how things are going over there. Yeah, buff titanium is so fun, isn't it? I just love it. It's so cool how it does that. That's why I love buff titanium. It's amazing in that way. All right. I start with the ears. Well, I don't blame you because the ears are the funnest part. I like to kind of save the ears as a little treat if my eyes turn out. And I started painting eyes first a long time ago when I started doing pet portraits, just because I knew if the eyes didn't turn out, it wasn't worth painting the rest of the portrait. And I still believe that's true. If your eyes don't turn out, the whole portrait's going to look really weird, and it's not worth painting the rest of it. So I'm zooming out so you can see the dark side of the portrait. Zoom out a little bit more. Here we go. Cool. So the dark side will just kind of be this whole side of his face. If you're feeling ambitious and excited, you could do this part vertically, tip your paper up. And that could be a lot of fun. I definitely would recommend it if you're feeling ambitious, because a lot of cool things can happen when you let go in that way and just have a lot of fun. The cool thing is this German Shepherd has a lot of color, not a ton of black. So this should go really, really fast. So we're going to try to do this purple over here and then white and gold over here. So I'm going to go ahead and paint with water kind of everywhere. Oh, my water is dirty enough that I think you might be able to see it. All over on the dark side. Kind of going, there's this really furry edge here. Let's not paint that yet. Let's go basically almost to the edges everywhere else. I gotta be able to see my goodies here. Okay. See my reference photo. You could leave this highlight to unpainted or very lightly painted in the black color. I'm gonna just extend the dark side into this point of fur on his face and then come in over here like that. Ha, that's cool. Okay, I got my flat brush. I have a 3/4 inch flat slash shader brush. They're a little bit thinner than a wash brush, which I like. You have a little bit more control on that way. So purple. I want to see what that purple color looks like mixed with quinacridone gold, which who knows, we might get green again, you guys. Anything's possible. All right, so I'm mixing up some of that purple. I'm going to put some over here and see if we can mix it with gold without getting green. Well, that works. That kind of looks brown. I think the pink is enough of a buffer color. So I'm going to add a little bit more pink and a little bit more gold to get a rich brownish gold. That's very pretty. I do like that. That's cool. That turned out. So instead of getting kind of an orange, we got more of a brown because we added some of that neutral tint. That looks really good. So I'm going to take my flat brush, and what we're going to do first is we're going to actually kind of go light to dark here. So that means we're saving the brightest whites. And what we're going to do now with our quinacridone gold is paint basically outlines around those brightest white shapes. Now, he doesn't have white, but we're kind of going to give him some. Not a ton, because this is still the dark side of the painting. So I'm just kind of painting around what will be the lightest light areas. And there could be areas where we need to maybe soften it, like right there. Would look good. So giving us and then a tiny bit over here. Kind of travels into his fur right here. Just looks really cool. I like how it does. I like his fur patterns a lot. Okay, now I'm going to pick up some of that brown that we made and basically give ourselves some of that. Now we're kind of going next to where we painted, where we'll eventually have our black color. So around where we would find the black. He's got a good mix of color right here, so we're gonna want to put everything right there. And a little bit. See, he's got dark, goes really dark right here, and then really white, and then it gets dark again. So put that right there. And then, let's see, I'm going to clean off my grainer brush really good and see if I can drop in a little bit of buff titanium. So I'm really scrubbing it, getting a nice heavy mix of buff titanium, and I'm going to put some down here. He's got this pretty kind of highlight almost, like his fur. So I'm just using that buff titanium to kind of give it a little bit of a highlight there. The other thing we can do now is pull this color into this really fluffy, furry edge. I'm going to blot it, get a little bit more water to work with. Even more. It's hard with grainer brushes because sometimes you need water, but you also want the bristles to separate. Fun, super fun. Okay, let's go in with grainer brush. Same thing, but now we're going to just do neutral tint. So let's clean it off, blot it really good. Not blot it, I guess. I gotta just get a good mix. And then neutral tint, I mean, so you could even practice to see if you got an amount that you like, but it'll behave a little bit differently once you get it on the paper. So darkest darks, start with your darkest darks, and then you can always add in more in the mid-tone areas if it needs it. So he has this super cute little eyebrow shape up here. And it goes down here. Let's get some more neutral tint. And then his lot of dark right here, kind of by his ear. And it goes. I'm gonna blot it a little bit, have more of a watery mix, just so it's lighter in value. And see if I can blot it a little bit more here. See if I can just kind of get this brindly area painted. And I really got to make sure I save this pretty highlight right here. And it's getting kind of green, so we might have to add in our opera pink. So I'm just going to grab some opera pink here. And give ourselves a little bit of a opera pink, purpley. You know, this brindly area even might work better in purple. I think that's what we should do instead. So doing the purple right away to avoid that green color. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a good solution. That was the way, you guys. We figured it out. We just needed to use that purple in the areas where we're adding gold, or we're adding black, dark black, over gold, especially if the gold is still wet. I don't think it would be as hard if the gold wasn't as wet as it is. I'm just going to come in with a blotted brush and soften this edge and kind of let it blend a little bit better. And I'm going to even put a little water right here and push that paint out. I like that line of lighter fur that he has right here. So you might need to babysit this area if you're lifting while it's wet. Just keep your eye on it. Okay, let's see. Just gonna see what happens there. All right, coming in with my purple. I might need to mix up a little bit more purple. Kind of heavy mix on a pretty blotted brush here. Oh, this is a pretty nice wetness level. This is happy with this. I was a little nervous it was going to be too dry. But we're going to I'm going to try to get it a little bit more wet. And then use my blotted brush to make it a little bit smoother. Even getting this area wet now wouldn't be a bad idea. But this could be a cool way if you were working tilted to let things run a little bit. That could be fun. It can be really fun. But now you can see how just the addition of water and then working with your grainer brush is making it a good combination of both like in focus and blurry. So I have buff titanium here, just adding a few stripes of that. I hope you can kind of see out a little bit. Yeah, you can see it okay. Because I'm just doing a little bit more abstract furry edges. And I usually like to anchor it a little bit by bringing it all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm going to go in and get some really heavy neutral tint purple and do the same thing that we just did with the buff titanium. A couple of suggestions of that black color. There. So we just kind of were messy with all our brushes and our colors down here. What else do we need to do? I think we just need a little bit more. We don't need a ton. think we just need a little bit more definition around his features. This is, I don't know, I just think it's so cool when it cauliflowers in random ways. But you can absolutely just take that out when if you want to just scrub that out, you can scrub it out. So just giving myself a little bit more of going in with the black here. Well, the purple, I should say, the purpley black. And making sure we have the areas that are black actually be black. And in a way, since we had to brighten up our reference photo so much, it helps us not to overpaint the super dark areas in that we see. Which is good, because once you put the paint down, it's hard to kind of lift it off. If you wanted to, you might not be able to. So I'm just kind of making those brindley areas over here around his face. And getting a more watery mix of the purple neutral tint color. There we go, kind of like that. Just putting another layer down. That looks really nice. I'm going to, where's our body brush? Here it is. Just soften this too. Soften and lift a little bit right here. That looks really nice. And even like looking back on how beautiful this purple that we achieved is, if I were to do the eyes again, I think I would have just done that purple around the pupil area reflections instead of trying to mix up that brown. I don't mind it though. It's really quite, I don't know, it's warm, which is nice. Okay. So this is super fun. And at this point, if you know from our other paintings too, it's kind of a matter of coming in and softening things, lifting things, adding greener brush texture if you need to. I'll probably lift out more over here. And we'll move on to the light side. And then we'll basically be done. We can add more detail and do whiskers and things like that. But how cool is it that we painted this side, right, the dark side first? Because if we were to go in and paint the light side, it would likely end up looking like this. And then we'd have to go super dark on the dark side. And that would look really heavy. But how cool does he look, even just right now, right? You could almost have a finished painting just like this, where we didn't even touch the light side, because it just looks so dynamic. That unfinishedness of it not only is adding dimension, but it's just adding interest, because we're having to fill in all this detail ourselves, which is making us want to look at it longer. So cool. So we're going to go super minimal on the light side with visible brushstrokes. That's going to be the name of the game. So what we're going to do is work on dry paper with our flat brush. Let's go in and start with, what should we start with? Should we start with gold or purple? I'm kind of feeling purple, and I think that's just because I don't want to overpaint well, I don't want to overpaint anything. But we're going to go ahead and make our purple, if you can see me mixing this up, even warmer. So I'm adding extra aqua pink to it, and I'm going to do a watery mix. So I'm getting enough water, and you can even test this out. Make sure it's a nice watery mix if you need to. Okay, I'm even getting a little bit more water on my flat brush. So we have a watery mix of purple. I'm going to come in and just do these shapes that we already traced in that are black will be this pretty purple color. And we'll come in and do another layer of black. Ooh, how fun is that? I love that. That's pretty, right? Right. This is why you gotta paint messy sometimes. Because then things like that happen. Ooh, that's dark. That's a little too dark. Calm yourself. We're gonna come in like that out a little bit. It's funny because I was intending to avoid purple on this painting. And that's like the dominant color. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. Just blending it out a little bit into the ear here. Pulling a little bit of ear color too. There, that looks pretty. So the reason I like to use a flat brush is because you get these pretty edges with a flat brush that are kind of angular. I just think it looks really good. I really like how that looks. So we're basically kind of glazing, doing this on dry paper. And this is still pretty dark here. I'm going to come in and give this some purple. Left out some of this. Get a little bit more of that purple and give ourselves some glazing. Just maybe we gotta keep our values in mind too as we do this. So I'm glazing a little bit on the snout. Okay, and then I want to glaze a little bit to make it look like he has a little bit of a lip here. That looks good. I'm gonna put a little bit more purple down here. And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and extend this over with water. But I'm not going to go all the way down. I think that would be too much, even though obviously his black fur does go all the way down. I don't know if I think that's going to be too much. So grabbing some purple and some neutral tint, I'm going to start up here. See if I can just lay down a tiny little layer of this. All right. And then kind of want a tiny little layer right here too, because that really over here as well. So just blotting it, getting it watery. And softening some edges here. And I'm gonna just move it. I'm gonna move that black down here because it's not really moving on its own. And it's very wet, but let's see if we can give it some grainer brush details. Where he's very fluffy. He's so very fluffy. The cool thing is you can go lighter and lighter as you go lower. So you can at least have a little bit of that fur down there. And this is kind of dark, so I'm gonna lift a little bit off. Because we're being very suggestive on this side. So even though it's black, we got to think about the values too. And I didn't really quite want it quite that dark. All right, I'm even gonna just, now that I've lifted some out, add a little bit more water so that it mixes and coolies in that shape. And then let's come in with, let's see, let's do a little purple glazing on the dark side too, because I do think that looks really nice. And it can give it a little dimension over here as well. I just think it's so funny that I didn't want to use purple and it's like all I'm using. It's hard. I think maybe when you get into a rut or a habit, it's hard to break it. And if there's anywhere else I want, if there's anywhere where it's particularly green too, is where I would glaze over in purple. And then I just want to give this a little dimension here. Okay, let's do one more swipe of a pinky purple. I think along this side of the nose. Need a little bit more water there. How cool does that look? Oh, sometimes you just gotta go for it. And then leave it alone, I say as I go back in. And do a little bit more purple up here. I like that purple a lot. As you can tell, you can definitely tell. It's so fun. It's pretty purple. I don't know if I've ever really mixed neutral tint and opera pink to make a purple before. I really like how it's working. So I want to put a little bit without lifting up too much of this purple down here. That's pretty. I'm gonna leave that alone. Actually, don't mind the lines right there. I think that looks kind of cool. And a little bit of purple here. I'm gonna soften that in. It's hard to know. It's hard for me to explain like where I decide to soften and where I decide to leave brush strokes. And I think it's just when I put it down, I see if I like it or if I think it needs to be softer. And that's the best way I can explain it, because you need a mix of both. Right? I don't want like everything to be harsh and I don't want everything to be soft. I want there to be a good balance of those things. And it's a good idea to glaze by the eyes so that the viewer's eye goes up to the dog's eye. And so, you know, you have that pretty color up by his eyes is a good thing. All right, the other thing I just want to do is glaze. Gotta make sure I glazed enough. Oh yeah, I was gonna maybe glaze on the ears a tiny bit. I don't want to do too much because I love this line so much that I almost don't want there to be another line. But I think we're gonna see if I like how this looks too. I like that. I'm going to soften it up here into it, but I like that line. I think paintings need a little bit of lines. All right, I'm going to go and just make sure I've got my values right in areas that I think should be a little darker. But I can kind of go overboard with darkness. So I want to keep that in mind too. Oh, very cool. Very cool. I think I'll do maybe a little grainer brush, tiny bit. We don't need a ton. So the only other thing I really wanted to do was glaze a tiny bit of gold, tiny bit of gold on the light side. So it's just going to be quinacridone, straight up quinacridone on the light side of his everything. There we go. So kind of a watery mix on a saturated brush. I'm just going to see if I can do a little bit of some gold highlights around his eye is always a good idea. Picked up some neutral tint there. Not too excited about that. Okay. That's pretty. That's really pretty, but it's kind of harsh. Kind of a lot. I don't need a ton. So I'm just kind of lifting in the area I put down so I don't have too much of it. And then where else do we need this? Like that looks really good. And then maybe a little bit right there. I kind of want to lift this line out a little bit. There we go. And bring it in. There we go. I'm talking quietly because sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if that's really what I want to do. So I'm like, well, should I try? And see what happens. Wish me luck. Diving in. That might be all we need. That might be. I don't know. Alright, let's just see if we can put a little bit on his nose. That looks cute. And a tiny glaze on his tongue. So we get a little more on my brush so I can try to do it in one swipe. It looks so cool. It's hard because sometimes you're just like, it looks so cool, we should do more. But then you gotta think, you gotta let some just be, just let it be. I really like that, and I think it's kind of done in that sense. Let's do whiskers, and then we can decide if we need to do anything else. I think it would benefit maybe from a little bit of greener brush in the. Sorry, that was me. I'm sorry. I hope that didn't scare anybody. Be prepared. Anything could happen when you paint with me. Okay, I'm just very sorry. I hope nobody got a heart attack from that. Okay, let's see. I'm just doing a little bit of greater brush where I think it might add some dimension. But we don't need a ton because this is pretty. This is really pretty how just washed out it is, especially because it's on the light side, and then this one has a little bit more detail. That looks really good. I just wanted to put a tiny bit of purple up here so that we all knew, okay, that's his little eyebrow thing. And it's super cute. And he's got to have one because it's super cute. And then a little bit more detail around these areas. Giving him a little bit of detail. So pretty, isn't it? It's hard to stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Okay. I can stop. So a little bit of muzzle detail on here with some purple. Just giving him some more like harder edges with fur on top of those pretty loose edges that we painted wet while it was wet. And then a lot more sparing with those details on the light side. Softening them a little bit too. Let's do whiskers finally, huh? And he doesn't need a ton. There you go. I wanted one a little bit longer. Cool. He could do some flatter too. And typically oftentimes I'll walk away from a painting and come back to it the next day. And usually it just clears my mind quite a bit in terms of what I see. And if I think it needs more right now, I can still just walk away, come back to it tomorrow, or even later today, anytime after you've had a little bit of a break. Because we're going to do the spider, but it's done, right? So what you could do is lift around the eyes. You could add if it needs to be tighter, like with detail, because even this nose, it's a little abstracty, more so than I would typically do. So you could come in and maybe tighten up the edges on the nose, or you could lift to highlight areas mostly around the eyes. That would be for. So I might do some of those things, today, tonight, tomorrow. If when I come back and compare it again to the reference photo, especially, sometimes I'll be like, oh, the nose isn't quite right, or oh, it actually needs this highlight above the eye type thing. And that's the beauty of it is, you know, you can just walk away and come back to it and decide at a later time if it needs a little bit more help. So I just did a little bit of splatter around. I like to just kind of do random splatter like I did, but then come back in and make it look a little bit balanced, more balanced than it typically will get with random splatter. I think splatter looks cool because it almost looks like it was even more loosely painted than it was. I'm a pretty messy painter though, so I get splatter, no, even if I don't try to get splatter. And I learned to lean into it because it actually makes the painting look pretty cool, I think. So I'll leave, unless it's ridiculous, weird looking splatter, or in a weird place that really detracts your attention, like redirects your attention. But otherwise, I'll just leave it alone and let it be and let it happen, and I think that looks kind of cool. So I just have kind of lighter splatter over here and a little tiny bit of dark splatter over there. And that was kind of when you would zoom out and just look at the whole thing. I hope you can see it all. I hope you were able to see it as I painted it. But a lot of fun, and like I said, I might go in and just tighten up a little bit of details, but that's kind of boring in terms of watching that in live. So I'll catch up with the chat with all of you. I hope here I am. Here we are. Okay, cool. I hope it all went really well with you if you're painting with me, or if you're going to watch and paint it again later. My husband told me to keep it on the painting a little bit longer, so I'll let you look at that while I chat instead of looking at me. But what color Inktense pencil will you be using for the whiskers? Ooh, Inktense. I've just used ink pen. An Inktense pencil is a good idea though. And if I was, I'd probably just use one of their black colors. But the cool thing with Inktense is you could do black on the dark side, and then you could come in on the light side, and you could even go do like a quinacridone gold color for the light side whiskers. How fun would that be? I'd be interested to see what that looks like. Sometimes I go in and make the whiskers like thicker at the bottom, but you got to be a little careful with that because those will really attract your attention. Those tight line work details can really attract your attention. So even looking at it through my screen right now, it just makes me see different things that I probably maybe want to try. Going back, I kind of wanted to like, oh, this could be a little bit darker, but not crazy. And I like that. That looks nice. This is gorgeous. You wore me out. I'm finished later. I know it's a lot, and especially a really big painting like this. Typically, I would paint a painting this large in 2 sessions, not just one. So it's a stretch for me too. The pink drip and bloom right here. I love that too. And it's little moments like that, especially when they just happen, because you don't have to think about it, right? So it's just happening. And you think, wow, that was unintended, but it looks so cool. That really makes it look like watercolor. It's such a special moment. This was the first time I was able to stay with you for the entire live demo. Thank you, Kathy. And it was such a crazy demo, wasn't it? Holy cow, with the sound problems at the beginning and then my painting dropping, and it was a lot. It was a big learning experience for me. So I appreciate you staying here with me. Thank you. Wonderful work considering the photo. I know. I do apologize that the photo itself was so low resolution, but I just couldn't get over this expression. And I'm really happy too with how restrained I was able to be on the light side. It can be hard to show that kind of restraint, especially when you put something down that looks pretty. Then you think automatically, your brain says, well, that'll be pretty everywhere. And that's just usually not the case. It'll just get worn out looking. So really happy with the light side area. And it also, the light side and dark side things, when you employ that light side and dark side principle for, yeah, whatever, whatever it is, you paint faster because you paint the dark side and then you're basically done because you don't have hardly anything to paint on the light side. And a great tip for that, increase the brightness of your reference photo. Really help you out with that. You're amazing how you use your colors. Love watching you paint. I have all the templates and hope to try these myself by watching your tutorials. You are so welcome and thank you. Yes, it's fun because you have access to this now forever. Like the tracing, the reference photo, this video, and you can adjust the colors like I obviously did. I mean, in the painting plan, I had hoped to make it really warm, but I ended up loving this purple and using that purple everywhere. So one of these days, maybe I'll be able to paint a painting without so much purple. So it's helpful to see how you do a tongue. My nephew sent a picture of their dog with a big tongue hanging out and I had no idea what to do. Oh yeah. No, and tongues are really fun. They're really, really fun. So yeah, I think we had a lot of fun doing that with like the base layer and then adding the shadow and pulling the shadow in to create that tongue line that they have. And I love with tongues too glazing a little bit. So we glaze a little purple and we glaze a little orange. And if I can show you that, I can zoom in on that even. You can see these little outlines of the paint. And I think that turned out really beautifully. So that's the other thing that made this painting successful is that we have a combination of these really soft and watercolor effects and then these tight lines, these grainer brush details where the colors just faded and mixed up here, and then having the light side and the dark side. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me for painting Leo with me and having fun. On Thursday in 2 days, we have a video all about the grainer brush, and I bought a bigger grainer brush that's actually a filbert shape, so it's rounded on the edges. So I'll be able to test that out for you too, and just kind of show you different ways I've used a grainer brush to give you some ideas of how different ways you can use it in your art too. So I will see you then, and wish me luck. Thursday I'll be on TV and pretty excited. I'm really excited. And I'm trying not to be nervous, but it'll be great. I'm really excited. So I will see you on Thursday. Thank you. Happy painting.